wrong button, you know. I didn't say that. I didn't.
You didn't say that.
No.
Hi, everybody. This is Ann Brennan. We were with ASMM Digital Small Business Connections, and we're with Frank King, who's a TEDx speaker and a TEDx talk coach. We just had a big spoof, so maybe we'll show that later too. But we were trying to have our podcast. We'd started it. We had all our little intros and everything ready, and then suddenly I disappeared, which was,
Yeah,
fun
it was
and
kind of
you
nice all by myself talking about.
like, I don't need a host. Forget about it. I'll talk by myself. So, which is actually a good segue into you're used to talking by yourself
You know,
because
that's
you,
I do stand up comedy, and I tell meeting planners, look, here's the deal: when you hire a stand up comedian for an event, uh, it's like one of those little multi tools, with a screwdriver, the corkscrew, because let's say the comedian's on stage. And something goes wrong where the next speaker's not there, the meeting planner's back going stretch, 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 or
right.
speaker doesn't show. Can you go on now? Yeah. Can you do an hour and 15? Absolutely. So
Yeah. So it's nice to have somebody who can just say, I got that. I got this. Let me handle it. So, what we're going to talk about today, what we had already started talking about, is how it doesn't always look. Depression does not always look like what you expect it to look like. And that's really for you an important subject. It's important for a lot of people, but you are a comedian who also struggles with suicide ideation, chronic suicide ideation.
yep.
So, can you explain what chronic suicide ideation is first?
Yes, and for those of you that were on with me by myself who've already heard this explanation, I forgive us. It's a review for you. It's going to be new for everybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the people have an idea in their mind what depression and what mental illness looks like. Uh-oh, there went Nan again.
Nope, I'm
Um,
here.
okay.
I'm here.
Okay, that's right. I have abandonment issues. Um, so that's one of the things that I accomplish when I speak is when they see me on stage, high functioning stand-up comic. I'm not what most people envision when they think of mental illness. I have depression and thoughts of suicide, chronic suicidal ideation. And what that means is that for me and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. And when I say small, my car broke down a couple of years ago, and I had three thoughts unbidden: get it fixed, buy a new one, or I could just kill myself. And it sounds odd, but that is chronic suicidal ideation to a T. The interesting thing, although it's rare, every keynote or training I've ever done, there's been, except for one, there's been at least one person in the audience, sometimes more, who have chronic suicidal ideation. They have no idea it has a name. They just think they're some kind of freak because of the way their brain works and completely alone. And a young woman came up to me after a college presentation and said, "Thank you for your keynote." I said, "You're welcome." She goes, "But I got to tell you, it made me weep." "How did it make you weep?" She said, "Well, your story about the car, get it fixed, buy a new one, just kill yourself." She goes, "I've been having those thoughts all my life. I didn't know it had a name. I just thought I was some kind of freak and completely alone. And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am not in fact alone, and I wept." So that's the power of starting the conversation on depression, thoughts, and suicide. Is what I discovered, Am, was when I was rolling up to that first TEDx talk, was that even though one person dies by suicide in the U.S. about every 11 minutes, hardly anybody talks about it unless
Right.
you bring it up, and then everybody's got a story. So
Yes.
my job is basically, and my clients tell me this all the time, we just brought you in here to start the conversation on suicide. That's my
Yeah.
job.
We talk about this a lot because, yeah, we have a charity for suicide prevention. That's what we do. And it's the same thing. As soon as we start talking about it, people will say, "Oh, yeah, I've been there." And I have had literally, of all the hundreds and hundreds of people I've spoken to, literally one say, "Oh, no, I've never been there." One. Everybody else is like, "Yeah, and that guy, we were thinking he's overcompensating because he had on this big bright yellow suit. He was like, "I'm fine." We're like,
Yeah.
okay. So, but I mean, but seriously, let's talk about the fact that, Yeah, I was telling you before this that there was a gentleman in a community I belong to who in Maryland who just died by suicide, and everybody was shocked. Everybody was shocked. So if we're not looking for somebody who's just walking around in a sad state all the time, what are we looking for?
Well, and here's part of the problem, man. Is people with mental illness are great actors. There's a reason I have a Screen Actors Guild card. And somebody asked me, "Are you a good actor?" Look, I acted like I was happily married to my wife, my first one, for 5 years. What do you think? Um,
Right.
well, we covered up, and I didn't come out as depressed and suicidal until I was 56 years old, and I came out on stage at that first TEDx. Nobody in my family knew, none of my friends, my wife didn't know that I was living with
Oh,
depression,
wow.
and thought, yeah, I mean, I I came out as it were on stage at that TEDx. Here's the thing: 8 out of 10 people, roughly, who are suicidal are ambivalent. That means they want somebody
Right.
to see something and say something. 9 out of 10
Right.
people who are actively suicidal give hints in the last week leading up to an attempt: direct, indirect, verbal, nonverbal, behavioral, which tells me they want somebody to see something and say something. The catch is, and we talked about that this morning, nobody in your community had any idea that the gentleman was struggling.
Right.
And that's my dog in the back growling at somebody here.
That's
Um, it's kind of like dog training. Like this, Buddy's a German Shepherd, and you hear people say, the dog bit me, never gave any indication he was going to bite me. Well, yes, he did.
yes, he
First of
did.
all, he froze. His eyes went flat. His ears went back. So there's three signs right there. He's basically
Right.
trying to tell you, don't come any closer. And then, then of course, then the hackles go up. That's the big. So when they say he never gave me any indication, same with depression, thoughts of suicide. He never gave any indication. Well, and there's something called suicide postvention, where I go in and I gather with, let's say it's an employee of a business, long term, has died by suicide. Come in and we get everybody together at the business who knew him, and we deconstruct the time leading up to the suicide. And what you find is like a big puzzle, and I help them put the puzzle together. Each person has a piece or two of the puzzle, but nobody has the entire puzzle. But
Right.
once we put everybody's pieces together, all the behavior that everybody noticed, but they never quite connected it, and you step back, then you can see it's right there. It's a friend of mine who does this, also calls it the tyranny of hindsight. Look into that puzzle, you can see it coming.
Right.
It's like
Right.
that movie and book, The Perfect Storm. The reader can see it coming, but the guys on the boat can't see it coming. It's the reverse here. The person who's living with suicidal ideation can see it, but the people around them, but they give hints. And 8 out of 10 are ambivalent. 9 out of 10 give hints. So that tells me that we could save a lot more people if we knew what to look for, what to listen for, what to do, what not to do.
Right. So one of the things I tell people when I say, because people ask me all the time, so what are we looking for? And one of the things I say, you're looking for changes, right? Changes in how they're reacting, how they're behaving. And some of that can be things like my son, when he was suicidal, he had loved soccer. He would play soccer as much as he could possibly play it. He would play it all the time, even if there was nobody around. He'd be out in the front yard with the ball, juggling and all sorts of things with the ball. I mean, it was his life. And suddenly he didn't care. That was a huge change. For me, I said, I think I'm a really, really nice person, a very nice person. I pride myself on this. And one of my midshipmen told me I was terrifying because I was so angry during that time. So, so that's one of the things to look for is changes. We said people who are drinking a lot more right now. So, are there specific things that you say that I'm missing here other than these changes?
No changes. Just a matter of what sort of changes. As you said, he used to love soccer and then all of a sudden didn't. And that's one of the questions you you ask, or when you go to your physician, they're supposed to ask you two gateway questions. One is, are you taking less enjoyment in activities, athletic, social, community activities, than you took in the past? And the second question is, have you felt hopeless in the last 2 weeks? And if you say yes to either one of those, the physician is supposed to ask the next 7 questions. I got to tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've been to the doctor. My doctor never asked
Oh,
any questions. So the fact that he withdrew from soccer or let's say it was involved in social activities, even like a soccer league, and then pull back. Any social isolation, pulling back, taking less and less enjoyment in things they used to do, hobbies and such that they don't do anymore. That's a big sign.
Right.
Um, a change in sort of body clock, in that people who are depressed oftentimes have trouble getting up in the morning because they just can't get out of bed, but rally in the afternoon once they're
Right.
up. Um, and then the third one, this is one you can actually spot on Zoom. They let their personal hygiene go. There's Zoom casual, which I'm in. My shirt's got a collar and it's clean, and my hair is clean. But if you're watching on Zoom and all of a sudden, the hair's not quite as clean, the clothes are a little bit dirty, like they just picked it up off the floor and put it back on. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed to get to the bathroom to shave and shower and run a load of wash. So
Right.
that's a big one, letting their personal hygiene slide, because it is difficult, not physically but mentally difficult oftentimes to get out of bed in the morning. And to your point about drinking, I think what's happening in a lot of cases is neurotypical people who've never been depressed before, because of the situation with the pandemic and the COVID and the social distancing, they're probably finding themselves depressed, although they may not have a name for it because they've never been there before.
Right.
And if drinking and drug use is increasing, it may be an attempt at self-medication, which is not uncommon in the mental health community. Many people self-medicate for quite some time. Hopefully, eventually get diagnosed and get proper treatment. But
Right.
yeah,
Well,
it's
and Frank, you're doing a talk about something about this in particular. What you've got to talk about mental health in the pandemic, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of it right now.
I've got a keynote called "Social Distancing and Staying Sane." Don't worry about your mentally ill
That's right.
friends. And
Right. And why aren't we worrying about our mental ill friends right now?
and I've done innumerable podcasts on this topic, because if you're mentally ill and you're relatively high functioning, therapy, medication, and chances are you have a self care plan. And why would a neurotypical person ever need a safe care plan unless, of course, there was a pandemic? But what are the odds on that? Um,
Right.
yeah, because for mentally ill people, every day we wake up in an uncertain world, and it's a struggle. Let me give you my favorite simile on this. There was a Greek character named Sisyphus, and his big crime was he gave fire to man, which I'm delighted he did because I love barbecue. Um, but they punished him by forcing him to roll a rock up a hill every day, with the idea that if he ever got it over the top of the hill and down the other side, he's done. But every time he got the rock near the top of the hill, it rolled back down. So having a mental illness is very much like that. Every morning, pandemic or no, you wake up and there's a rock on the hill. Some mornings the rock is small and the hill's not so steep. Some days the rock is a boulder and the hill is Kilimanjaro. But every day there's a rock and a hill, and the day comes for a lot of us when we wake up and we cannot move that rock. And
Right.
so if you are getting therapy and medication and you've got a self care plan, and my self care plan is diet. I'm on the keto diet, and I do intermittent fasting, exercise. I've got an old uh, Nordic track somebody gave me in my living room. You wouldn't recognize it because there's no laundry hanging on it, but it's there. And good night's sleep. Sleep is restorative. And meditation. I meditate twice a day. Just a short guided 30-minute after a meal. And medication if it's called for. That's something else I worry about, people who are suffering from situational depression. Not mental illness, but just situational depression. I think I think they often think that starting to take an antidepressant is like a life sentence, and
Right.
it's just to get you over the rough patch. You don't have to be on it for the rest of your life. And by the
Right.
way, if you're prescribed an antidepressant for this situational depression and it doesn't work very well, then my advice is they have a test as a DNA cheek swab, and they take your DNA and they match it with the antidepressant they believe will work best with your metabolism. So you get a lot less of the go on, doesn't work, taper off. Go on, doesn't work, taper off. And it's a couple $100. Most insurances cover it. It's just it's not exact, but it's a much more precise way to
Right.
determine
I
whether.
didn't even know that existed.
I don't feel bad. I get clinicians have stared at me like George Bush looking at the New York Times crossword puzzle when I've told that story. They're like, "What?" DNA cheek swab. What? So
Right.
yeah, so that's what I would do if the because I've heard people say, look, I don't feel bad, I don't feel good, antidepressant, I don't feel anything. That's not the way it's supposed to work. It's supposed to, just take the edge off. Just what I take just doesn't make me giddy, just takes the edge off. So so that's
That's Yeah,
yeah,
and I think you're right. I want to say something about what you just said though. So many people think, they get situation. Well, okay, depression just lies to you. One of the things I describe depression as Hagrid. You know Hagrid from Harry Potter?
yeah.
Depression is Hagrid, except for he's not nice. And he just stands there and he screams nasty things at you and he completely lies to you all the time. And he's just screaming these lies. So it's hard to hear anything else. But what depression yells at you is that this is forever. This is how you're going to feel from now until forever. It's never going to go away. And if you've never dealt with that before, it's easy to believe it. If you've gone in and out of them, then it's like, wait a second. Here comes that mean guy again. He's yelling at me again. Hold on. Let me figure out how to take care of myself. If you haven't, it's really easy to get yourself stuck and think this doesn't end and there is no hope. And one of the things I love about you, one of the things actually that makes me tear up when I think about you is that you found hope in something that you already loved. You found hope in this talent that you have for speaking to people and for reaching them. And you found it through these, through TEDx talks. You started talking on these TEDx talks. And
Hmm.
not only did you give yourself hope, but you're giving others. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. I want you to talk about how you started doing TED Talks, what you're getting out of them, and what you're giving to people in the process.
Well, I began the TEDx process. I've been a stand-up comedian for 34 years, first in the clubs and then did the corporate rubber chicken circuit, after dinner, after lunch for the Association of Ice Packagers in Texas or whatever. And then came the recession, the last recession. And meeting planner said to me, look, we love you, Frank. We can't pay you that kind of money just to be funny. You need content, takeaways, action items. And I always want to do that, by the way. I always wanted to make a living and a difference beyond just the 45 minutes of making them happy at a comedy show. But I thought I have nothing to teach anybody. So I bought a book by a woman named Judy Carter, and it's called The Message of You, Turning Your Life into a Money-Making Speaking Career. And I went into the book thinking I got nothing. And about halfway through, because she leads you down the primrose path, step by step, to find your heart story, the thing that makes your heart sing, the thing that inspires people. And I found it.
Right.
I thought about my near suicide attempt and my family's history. And so, but then I had to rebrand because everybody thought of me, even though they wanted content, takeaways, they thought of me as a funny speaker, not a speaker who was funny. So my wife says,
Right.
do a TEDx talk. And I said, famously, what's a TEDx talk? And just by chance that week, I got an email from a TEDx event up in Vancouver, British Columbia, and they said, would you like to apply to do a TEDx talk? And I thought I would. So I applied and I got it, got my first one. Not, and it gave me a chance to do something on stage. It was serious, although there is humor in the talk, as you might imagine. People ask me about how does a comedian, how do you straddle those two worlds? Well, it's not jokes so much as funny personal experiences. For example, when I was researching for my TEDx, my first one, I went to TED.com and I thought, well, let's see how other people handle the topic. So I typed suicide in the search box. And of all the hundreds of thousands of talks on TED, there were 30 on suicide, just three. And then it hit me, and I told this story, this funny story, in my TED talk. And I go, yeah, only three. And then it hit me, well, let's face it, if you're really good at suicide, you're not going to be doing a TEDx talk. The audience went nuts. Uh, so it's funny stories, real life things happen to me. And then
Right.
once I did my first one, I got an idea for this. I actually got invited to two more phone calls. Do you have another talk on mental health? And of course, mental health is a big topic nowadays, with the suicide rate being what it is, and teen suicide, on the rise. And so the next two I got by phone call, and then the fourth one I had to apply. It's called Suicide: The Secret of My Success, Dead Man Talking. And that one, by the way, is really about entrepreneurs because
Okay.
I had read a couple of studies that said entrepreneurs were a third of them, a full third of entrepreneurs depressed and suicidal. And the clinicians determined, they thought, the reason was long hours, little sleep, unmet expectations. And I thought to myself, you know what? I bet that's true for most of the entrepreneurs, but I bet there's a subset, a significant subset, who are not depressed and suicidal because they're entrepreneurs. They are, in fact, entrepreneurs because they were depressed and suicidal, which is where I was.
Right.
Married to the wrong woman, working in the wrong business, not pursuing comedy, which is where I thought I belonged. And I thought to myself, if I don't do something different, I'm going to kill myself. So my second thought was, what I got to lose? I'll divorce my wife, quit my job, try comedy. If it works great, if it doesn't, I still kill myself. And
Right.
as most mentally ill people think, I thought that was just me. And then I kept bumping into comedians and entertainers and entrepreneurs who had the very same thought process. They had this dream and they were living somebody else's life. And they thought, if I don't do something, I'm going to kill myself. Well, what
Right.
the heck? So,
Yeah, I've often thought that too. I think that's exactly the case, that people, what else, what are you going to do otherwise? You might as well give this one a try.
and there are very few things on this planet more powerful than somebody with absolutely nothing to lose. If I stayed put, I was going to die. So that's one of my superpowers. I was able to put all that on the one roll of the dice
Right.
because
Right.
people talk.
Exactly. So you've said a couple of times in here, you've said, and I thought I was alone. And I think
Yes,
it is the thing that so many people think. They think they're alone. They don't, and as soon as you start talking about it, you realize, no, I mean, my neighbor, not my neighbor. I haven't talked to my neighbor because I just moved here, but the person who lives next to me, or the person who I'm sitting next to on the bus, the person who's in a class with me, everybody has been through something. And when you start talking about it, you realize how they've had that same thought. They've done the same thing. They've gone through the same emotion, and it's okay. You're
well,
not crazy.
and not just the people who live with mental illness, but the people who live with the people who live with mental illness.
Right.
Um, when I did my fourth TEDx, I was in the first flight of speakers. They're going to take a break, and so one of the other speakers said to me, "Are you leaving when you get done?" I said, "I can't leave." "Why can't you leave?" I said, "Well, when we break for lemonade and cookies, just watch what happens." So we broke for lemonade and cookies, and sure enough, I'm standing there. There are 8 people lined up to talk to me,
Right.
including a mother and daughter who were in Pensacola, where the TEDx was. They Googled things to do in Pensacola. Up came the TEDx talk. They saw suicide prevention, the mental health comedian. They paid
Uh-huh.
$95 a piece to come to the event and to get in line to talk to me because the mother of the two, had a brother who had died by suicide roughly 3 months before, after he'd moved in with them and seemed to be getting better. And
Okay.
what she wanted to know was, she said, you have stared into the abyss and come back. Why did my brother want to kill himself? And I said, well, there's a good chance that he did not want to kill himself. He simply wanted to end the pain.
Right.
So sometimes I'm reaching out to people with mental illness, and sometimes I'm reaching out to the people who love people with mental illness to help decode what's happening, inside the head of the person with the mental illness.
Right. Well, and I want to say something because I think you've done similar things. I work with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and I give one of their talks called Talk Saves Lives.
Yeah.
And I've done that. I've done the talk that you and I talked about, which is check on your strong friends. And by the way, you might be your strong friend. And each time I've done these talks, every single time, without exception, I've had someone come up to me and say, I was thinking about dying by suicide. I was considering it, and I don't want to. And it makes a huge difference because I think you give them that little glimmer of hope of, I've been there, and then I came out. And if they can see, I think what people don't understand is that ultimately suicide is a complete loss of hope. When you're like,
A
there's just
hopelessness.
nothing more. Yeah, I'm just completely helpless. There's nothing I can do. This is it. And if they think that, it's hard for them to get past it. If you can share your story and give them that little glimmer of hope, then life can get better.
Yeah, I do. I
So,
teach something called QPR: question, persuade, refer. And I tell the audience, look, this is not therapy. I'm not a clinician. All I'm here to do today is to plant seeds of hope
right.
and to let you know you're not alone. And I've got a TEDx coaching client named Liv, short for Olivia, and she came very close. I mean, close enough that she was staring at the block on the kitchen counter with all the knives stuck in it, trying to
Mm-hmm.
figure out which one she was going to use,
Right.
and been drinking to get her courage up, and she still remembers the feel of the cold steel bite in her at her throat. Did not, did not do it obviously, but her talk, and she wrote a book, Live to Tell, short for Olivia, Live to Tell,
Right.
and the subtitle is Hopelessness is Just a Visitor, with the
Awesome. I
idea
love
that,
that.
yeah, and you're right. I've gotten to the place where, because I know my cycle is a couple 3 days, it feels like I turned up the force of gravity. First day, it kind of levels out the second, and then I can feel it, the gravity loosening its grip the third. And there are days when I just have to tell myself my only goal in life is to get through that day.
Right.
I got to, one of my techniques is I have a to-do list. It's called gamification. I make a list of 6 things I want to get done that day. And the game is, once I scratch off number 6, I don't care if it's 3 in the afternoon and broad daylight. I can go back to bed and binge watch. That show. I'm watching the show about the young woman who played chess on
Oh,
Netflix.
the Queen's Gambit. It's
Yeah,
lovely, isn't it?
God, yeah. So, but I win if I get all 6 things done. The idea is the game gets you out of bed, gets you moving forward, because
Right.
movement is not a cure, but it is palliative. So that's gamification is one of the techniques I use again, and I teach neurotypical people. The third leg of that stool, by the way, self-care plan, gamification. They asked a guy who was in the space shuttle for a year by himself, and they said, "How do you survive that kind of social isolation?" He said one word: routine. He goes, "I go to bed the same time every day. I get up at the same time every day. I eat my meals roughly the same time. I plan my recreation same time. I binge watch Netflix same time." So
Right.
you've got to control the things you can control, which mentally ill people constantly are doing. Listen, it's above my pay grade. I cannot do anything about that. I need to control the things I can control. So
Exactly. Control the controllables. Exactly.
yeah,
My son says a couple of things that I thought were just really smart. But one of the things he said was, because depression's lying to you, if you feel like you want to lie on the couch, you need to say, oh, wait, no, 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 no. Depression's telling me I want that. So I need to go for a walk. Right. And just do the exact opposite. So that's one of the things. And then the other thing he did, and I think it was just a really brilliant thing, he kept a list of all the people who would be affected if he died, and really thought them through. And he talked about things like his mom and his dad and his brothers and his dog, but then he talked about his math teacher, right? And the kid who sits beside him on the bus. And so he went through that, so that he's like, do I really want to do this to them? And it was a helpful way to get through that time for him.
well, and it is helpful in another way. People say that suicide is a selfish act, and from the outside looking in, it is terribly selfish. But from the inside looking out, the one of the 3 legs of the 3-legged stool on suicide is a sense of burdensomeness. When I was so depressed after the bankruptcy, I had $1 million life insurance policy. So again, it was destroying my wife. I thought, you know what? I can fix this. I'll kill myself, and she'll get $1 million. I mean, she'll be heartbroken, but she'll not be broke. She'll be restored financially. So if somebody said to me, "Weren't you thinking about your wife when you came so close?" Absolutely.
Right.
I was feeling like, well, that I was a burden and she'd be better off without me. Now it's an irrational thought. I'm sure. I hope if you ask her, she would say no. Keep the money. I'd rather you stick around. But that's so the fact your son's actually making a list of the impact on these people is an excellent exercise, rather than
Right.
think I'm a burden. The world would be better
Absolutely.
off without me.
Absolutely. And I want to say that. So we've talked about it being entrepreneurs, we've talked about young people. The thing about suicide is it doesn't discriminate. And so what if you're listening to this and you're not an entrepreneur, if you're listening to this and you're not a teenager, there are so many people who are affected by depression, who are affected by thoughts of suicide. And during this time, it's huge. So we have to think about that we're not alone in this, and that it's not just those people. So we're seeing more and more senior citizens. We're seeing younger and younger people do it. We're seeing, the statistics are shocking that in how broad it is, that it's not just one age group or one group, one sex or one career choice that it leads there. And people say, well, it's really high in the LGBT community. These days, it's just high across the board. So we have to, I love what you're doing, Frank. I think it's really important. I'm so glad that you're here to talk to us about it. I do want to give you a chance to talk about something that you do before we go, because there are a lot of people who, you said you found hope in your TEDx talks. There are a lot of people who want to do that and don't know how, and you trained for that. You train people to do that, right? So can you talk just a little bit about that before we go?
Yes. Well, one last thing before we go. If you take the things I said about, signs of depression, and you see those in someone you know or love, then you have to ask this question: are you having thoughts of suicide? If you can't ask it, find somebody who can. And if by
Right,
chance they say they are, then you say, what's your plan? Or do
right,
you have a plan? And then what's your plan? And if it's detailed, you need to get them on the phone with the suicide prevention lifeline.
right.
That's
Yeah.
that all there
I'm
is.
so glad you said that. It is,
Yeah.
yeah, I am shocked, by the way, by this. I talked to a professor at University of Maryland. I'm just going to say where. I talked to a professor at University of Maryland. And I told him this. She goes, I, I had no idea. I was like, you're a professor at college and you're dealing with children every day, young people every day, and you didn't know this. So this is, I think it's something that's so, I wish we could shout that from the rooftops and have people understand it. So that it is so important. Ask that question and then ask if there's a plan. And if there's a plan, yes, absolutely, right then get them on the phone with somebody, because, and if they've been thinking about it, try to get them help. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to go down that road, and you can help by talking. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you
And
asked that.
if you're with them physically and they won't pick up the phone, you pick up the phone, call the lifeline. The volunteer will do their best to talk the phone into the hand of the person who is in crisis. So
Right.
that's, and
Absolutely.
if you're at a distance, and that happens to me all the time. My roommate from college is 1,000 miles away. What do? Well, if you think he's actively suicidal, call the police in that town. Tell him, that you think he's actively suicidal. Ask him to go by and do a welfare check.
Right.
It may buy him 3 days in a mental health facility with no belt or shoestrings, but he'll be alive.
Right.
So the TEDx, I have a psychologist client, by the way, who has chronic suicidal ideation, and he didn't know that until I told him. So it's not the first clinician who never heard of it. I do TEDx talks. I coach TEDx talks, and here's some things people ask: can anybody do a TEDx talk? Yes. Do you get paid to do a TEDx talk? No, you don't get paid except the nice video with the big red letters behind you to promote your
Right.
book, or your speaking career, or your charitable cause. Um, do you have to pay anything to do it? No, you don't have to pay anything. They don't pay you. You don't pay them. It's that's just the way it's set up. And then the linchpin of a TEDx talk is the idea worth spreading. You have to have an idea that they deem is worth spreading. What are you going to teach our audience?
Right.
And people, well, how do you find an idea worth spreading? Well, again, the one word, passion. It needs to be something you're passionate about, something that inspires you. It's hard to inspire other people if you're not inspired. So I tell
Right.
my clients as we're going through this process, we need an idea that makes your heart sing. That just you can't wait to talk about with other people. And because you do the TEDx, there's 100 people or 200 people or 300 people, but it goes on YouTube.
Right.
And I get about once a month, somebody will stumble on one of my TEDx talks on YouTube, or a young woman sent me a DM on Twitter. I reached out to connect with her just because, I reach out to connect with people on Twitter. She writes back. She goes, "I can't believe it's you." She goes, "I saw your TED talk last fall at the lowest point in my life," and she goes, it was just that little ray of hope I needed. You had gotten through it. You were willing to go on stage in front of the camera and be vulnerable, share your
Right.
story. And she goes, "That's probably why I'm still here today." And
Right.
people go, how'd you pick depression, thoughts of suicide as a topic? Well, the topic picked me, really. But it is something that I am passionate about. So that's how you find an idea worth spreading. It really needs to be something that you are passionate about. And
Right.
you have to apply, and here's an easy way to apply. Go to your Google machine, type in TEDx applications 2021, and just go down
Okay.
the list. And some of them will be expired. The window's closed. But I went through the first 3 pages of Google yesterday. I found a half a dozen active links, open windows for application all over the country. And,
Okay.
and and that's how you apply. You click the link. There's an application. Your name, email. What's your idea? Why are you the person that should be talking about this? So it's a relatively simple process. Oh, a couple of tips. One, they'll say, "Who do you want to nominate?" That threw me. Turns out you nominate yourself.
Okay.
I think they do that. I think they do that to discourage people because they get so many applications.
Right.
And my advice is you need to make the title and subtitle something that's so interesting because they get a couple hundred applications.
Right.
The last 2 talks I did, I didn't have to audition. They just liked the title, subtitle, and the idea. And my last talk was it's a little more comedy based, but it's called "Mental Health and the Orgasm: Treat Your Depression Single-Handedly." And I didn't have to audition. They called up and they go, "No, you're on."
that's, that's a great title.
Yeah, well, and so if you're thinking about doing a TEDx, and this is what I do, this is a big chunk of what I do for my clients. I want to make it, so interesting that they cannot put the application down until they read the whole thing.
Right.
Like we
Right.
mentioned, Live to Tell, which is the name of Olivia's book, and hopelessness is just a visitor. And by the way, the first one she applied to with that title, TEDx Bryant, she's got an audition coming up.
Oh,
So
okay.
it
Awesome.
for me, it's all about the title, subtitle. The 1 or 2 sentences of the idea. That's where you got to hook the committee because they got a couple hundred applications. They want to throw you in no pile as fast as they can.
Right. Right. So, all right. So, how do people? I've got one up here, one website up here, yourtedxcoach.com, so they can
Yep,
reach you there.
yep.
Where else might they reach you?
And by the way, at that website, there's a free PDF download. It's the 6 things you can do to kill your chances of landing a TEDx talk. And so
Okay.
you can
Okay.
download that for
So
free.
read that before you apply.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other is the mental health comedian, or as we say down south,
Okay.
the mental health comedian.
The
If you go there, I'm writing a series of 4 books with psychologists and a therapist on men's mental health because
okay.
8 out of 10 people who die by suicide in the U.S. now are men.
Oh
And
my gosh.
if you go to thementalhealthcomedian.com, I narrated the book for Audible, the first volume,
Okay.
and there's an MP3 on there you can download for free. The entire unabridged 4.5 hours of me talking about men's mental health, or voicing the book. So, and let me give my phone number out, Ann, if you don't mind.
Yep.
858-405-5653. If you put that in the show notes, that'd be great. 858-405-5653.
Yep.
And here's why. Every keynote I do, I put the number up on the screen. I say to the audience, look, you're suicidal, call the lifeline. If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person. Here's my phone number. Because I'm less likely to be judgmental. I'm just going to listen
Right.
and co-sign whatever nonsense you're going through. And and people call about themselves, about other people, resources.
Right.
So yeah. I mean, it doesn't
Yeah.
happen all the
I get a
time.
lot. I get a lot of those calls. We did finally have to say, keep in mind that I'm not 911.
Yeah.
Because I'd get calls at 11 o'clock at night. I'd be asleep and I'd wake up in the morning to this phone call that, was on my phone in the kitchen, this voicemail that was terrifying. And it was awful to hear it because I'm like, did they call somebody else after me? Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so the first thing you said was call 911. If you're suicidal, call 911. But yes, there are so many people. And one of the reasons we started Burgers and Bands is to show people that there are so many people who are there to help you. And we say, if you come to one of our events, it's a music event. If you come there, pretty much you could say to anybody in that place, hey, I'm struggling. And they'd be like, how do I help you? What can I do? And that's true in life.
There's a text line, suicide prevention text line as well. For younger
741-741.
Yeah, text the word
Right?
connect or help. Yep. That
Yeah.
way, because kids are more forthcoming oftentimes. Young people on text than they are on the phone. So
Exactly. So, all right. Hey, you stick around just 1 minute. I want to tell everybody what's coming up next. Wednesday, we're going to talk about working on your business and not just in your business. So it's so easy to be the one that makes the cupcakes and forget about, sending out the bills, paying the bills, taking care of building the business, taking care of your marketing. So we're going to talk about that part. I want to remind you guys, we jumped right into this today. And so I didn't tell you who we are, what we do. We are ASMM Digital Small Business Connection, and we are the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Our idea is to give you something you can walk away with and put to work in your business today. And sometimes it's in your life, because again, your life is your business, and that they just are hand in hand. You have to take care of your mental health. I said it over and over again. Mental health is health. If you had pain in your chest, you would go to a doctor. If you're struggling with suicide ideation, if you're struggling with depression, if you're struggling with anxiety, please ask for help. Go to the doctor. Mental health is health. I want to remind you, please do subscribe. And then I'm going to come back to you, Frank. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate this.
Well, my pleasure. And you and I both know that entrepreneurs, small business, 40% of the United States GDP, and they are, and tens of thousands of them are struggling or on their way out of business. So it's a very difficult time to be an entrepreneur. So yeah, your mental health is paramount to survive this thing.
Absolutely. And I do want to say one other thing. It is easier than ever right now to get in touch with a mental health professional, because they're not always meeting in their office anymore. They're doing it virtually. So you can call, make an appointment. You don't have to miss work. You don't have to be away. You can talk to them just like this. You can have a Zoom call. You can have a telephone call. I actually talk to my therapist when I'm walking. So there's a lot of things you can do right now.
Well, and I read an article on that. It says, the nice thing about telemedicine is there's no commute. You're sitting comfortably in your dwelling. And so the people who have been doing this on the clinical side have said seems much more effective, because there's no, all that time in traffic with the, and all the hassle. If there is a silver lining to the pandemic, it's mental health telemedicine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Frank, stick around 1 second. Bye-bye.